The night was the coldest Minnesota had seen in 100 years. The highway stretched empty and dark, under a sky filled with stars that seemed frozen in place. The temperature display on Jaiwan Park's cab dashboard read -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and it kept dropping. Jaiwan didn't want to be driving tonight. At 45 years old, he had seen enough winter storms to know this one was dangerous. But bills needed to be paid, and his old-style manual drive cab was one of the few still running in this weather. The automatic cars had all shut down due to the extreme cold. He was about to head home when his cab's screen lit up with a ride request. The location was the University of Minnesota's main campus. Jaiwan thought about refusing, but the payment offer was too good to pass up. With a deep sigh, he turned his cab around and headed toward the campus. 20 minutes later, he saw her standing under a broken street light. Hana Lee hugged herself tightly, trying to stay warm. Her dark coat wasn't thick enough for this weather, and her breath came out in white clouds that froze almost instantly in the Arctic air. "Get in quickly," Jaiwan said as he pulled up, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "You're letting the heat out." Hana rushed into the back seat, her fingers stiff from the cold as she tried to close the door. "Thank you so much for coming. You're the only cab that accepted my request. I need to get to Duluth. My grandmother is sick and—" "Payment first," Jaiwan cut her off. He wasn't interested in stories. In his 15 years of driving, he had heard every excuse possible. Hannah pulled out her phone and tried to connect to the cab's payment system. The screen flashed red. She tried again and again. "I'm sorry, something's wrong with the connection. Could we try once we get moving? It's just the cold. I think it's affecting the—" "No payment, no ride," Jaiwan said flatly. The memory of being cheated last month by another student was still fresh in his mind. "Get out." "Please," Hannah said, her voice shaking. "I have the money. The system just isn't working. I can try a different app, or I can pay cash when we—" "Out." Jaiwan's voice was hard as ice. He had heard too many similar promises that ended with him losing money. "I won't say it again." "But there's nothing out here," Hannah protested, looking through the windows at the empty highway. "The next town is miles away. No one's driving in this weather. I could freeze toe." Jaiwan got out, walked around to her door, and opened it. The bitter cold rushed in like a knife. Hannah tried one more time to make her phone work, but Jaiwan had already reached in and pulled her bag out. "Please," she said one last time. But Jaiwan's face showed no emotion. He had built walls around his heart years ago, and tonight they were as solid as ever. Hannah stepped out into the killing cold. Jaiwan got back in his cab, turned it around, and drove away. In his rearview mirror, he could see her standing there, getting smaller and smaller until she was just a dark spot in the white wasteland. It wasn't until he was 5 miles away that the first crack appeared in his walls. A small voice in his head whispered that he might have just killed someone. He pushed the thought away, but it came back stronger. The temperature was still dropping. Nobody else was on the road. The next town was too far to walk. Jaiwan gripped his steering wheel tighter and kept driving. But with each mile, the weight in his chest grew heavier, and the voice in his head got louder. He didn't know that his simple decision that night would lead to events that would change not just his life, but the future of the entire human race. Hannah watched the cab's taillights disappear into the darkness. The cold bit through her coat like sharp teeth. She had to find shelter fast, or she would not survive the night. She pulled out her phone again, but the screen was black. The battery had died from the extreme cold. Hannah looked around, trying to see through the darkness. That's when she noticed something strange. A faint blue glow coming from behind a group of trees about half a mile away. Every step was hard. The wind cut through her clothes, and her legs felt heavy. But Hannah kept walking toward the blue light. It was her only hope. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, she reached the trees. Behind them stood a large building that looked like an old warehouse. Most of it was dark, but one section glowed with that strange blue light she had seen. There were no signs, no company names, nothing to show what this place was. "Hello," she called out, but the wind took her words away. Hannah walked around the building, looking for a door. The walls were made of metal and concrete, covered in frost patterns that sparkled in the starlight. She found a door, but it had no handle, just a flat metal panel where a handle should be. Hannah pressed her hand against it, hoping it might be some kind of sensor. Nothing happened. The cold was getting worse. Her fingers had stopped hurting, which she knew was a bad sign. She leaned against the door, close to giving up. That's when she heard it, a low humming sound coming from inside the building. It wasn't the sound of heating or air conditioning. It was different, almost like music, but not quite. Hannah pressed her ear against the door. The humming got louder, and now she could hear other sounds too. Clicks and beeps that reminded her of the science labs at her university, but somehow different. Suddenly, the door slid open with a soft whoosh. Hannah, who had been leaning on it, fell forward into a brightly lit hallway. The floor was clean and white, and the walls seemed to glow with their own light. The air inside was warm, and she could feel her frozen fingers starting to tingle as they warmed up. She stood up quickly, expecting alarms to go off or security guards to appear. But the hallway remained quiet except for that strange humming sound, which was louder now. "Is anyone here?" she called out. Her voice echoed down the hallway. No one answered. Hannah knew she should leave. This was clearly private property, and she was trespassing. But the thought of going back into that killing cold made her take a step forward instead. Then another, and another. The hallway led to a large room filled with screens and machines unlike anything Hannah had ever seen. They seemed to float in the air without any support. Strange symbols moved across the screens, changing color and shape in patterns that almost made sense, but not quite. "You shouldn't be here," a calm voice said behind her. Hannah turned around quickly. A man in what looked like a security guard uniform stood in the doorway. His name tag read Dae-ho Kim. He looked human, but something about him felt different. "I'm sorry," Hannah said quickly. "I was stuck in the cold, and I just needed shelter. I can leave now." But even as she said it, she noticed something odd. The man's shadow on the wall didn't match his shape. It looked like something else. Dae-ho Kim smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I'm afraid leaving isn't an option anymore," he said. "You've seen too much. And besides," he looked at a screen that showed the temperature outside. "You were meant to find this place tonight." "What do you mean I was meant to find this place?" Hannah asked. She watched as Dae-ho Kim's shadow continued to shift on the wall behind him, taking shapes that made no sense. Dae-ho walked to one of the floating screens and touched it. The strange symbols changed to English. "Earth is being evaluated," he said simply. "Tonight is a very important test." Evaluated? By whom? Hannah's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The room seemed larger now, as if the walls were slowly moving outward. "By the Galactic Council," Dae-ho said. As he spoke, his appearance began to change. His skin took on a slight blue tint, and his eyes grew slightly larger. "We have been watching Earth for a very long time. Your species is reaching a critical point in its development." Hannah took a step back. "You're not human." "No," Dae-ho agreed. "But I have lived among humans for 20 Earth years. My job is to observe and report back to the Council." He gestured at the screens around them. Everything that happened tonight was planned. The extreme cold, the cab driver, your phone not working. We needed to see how humans would react. You put my life at risk for a test." Hannah felt anger rising inside her. "I could have died out there." "You were never in any real danger," Dae-ho said. "We were watching. If your body temperature had dropped too low, we would have intervened. But we needed to see the true nature of human choices, both yours and the cab drivers. Hannah thought about Guy-One and his cold eyes as he forced her out of the cab. So he was part of your test too. Did you make him act that way? No, Daho shook his head. We simply created a situation. His choices were his own, just as your choices were your own. You could have gotten angry when your phone didn't work. You could have tried to steal a cab driver's money. You could have given up in the cold, but you didn't. The screams around them now showed images from earlier that night. Hannah saw herself walking through the snow, saw herself trying to find a way into the building. Why is this evaluation so important? She asked. Earth stands at a crossroads, Daho explained. Your technology is advancing quickly. Soon you will develop faster than light travel. When that happens, you will join the wider galaxy, whether you are ready or not. The Council needs to know if humans can be trusted with advanced technology, if you can overcome your prejudices and fears. And if we fail this test, then Earth will be isolated. A barrier will be placed around your solar system. You will be free to develop on your own, but you will never join the galactic community. Daho's expression was serious. And tonight's test isn't over yet. As if on cue, red lights began flashing across the screens. An alarm started to sound. Daho's face showed concern for the first time. What's happening? Hannah asked. Someone else has entered the test area, Daho said, checking the screens. The cab driver. He's coming back. His expression grew more worried. But he's not alone. Something is following him. Something that shouldn't be here. What do you mean? There are others who don't want Earth to pass this test, Daho said. They believe humans are too dangerous to join the galactic community, and they will do anything to prove they're right. The building's lights flickered, and the humming sound grew louder. Hannah could feel the floor vibrating under her feet. We need to help him, she said, surprising herself. After what Guy-One had done to her, she should want him to face whatever was coming. But she didn't. Daho looked at her with what seemed like approval. The test continues, he said softly. And every choice still matters. Guy-One Park drove for 10 miles before he could not take it anymore. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him until he could hardly breathe. He pulled his cab to the side of the empty highway and put his head in his hands. The temperature gauge now showed minus 55 degrees Fahrenheit. No one could survive long in that cold. The image of Hannah standing alone in the darkness filled his mind. He thought of his own daughter, who had died 5 years ago in a winter storm after her automatic car broke down. He had blamed technology then. Now he was no better than the machines he hated. I have to go back, he said to himself. He turned the cab around, pushing the engine as fast as he dared on the icy road. That was when he noticed something strange on his radar display. The screen showed 3 objects moving behind his cab. They were too fast to be cars, too low to be planes, and they were catching up quickly. Guy-One increased his speed. The objects matched his pace. In his mirrors, he could see lights now, not normal headlights, but pulsing blue and red glows that seemed to float above the road. His cab's electronics started acting strangely. The radio turned on by itself, playing nothing but static. The temperature display flickered between numbers that made no sense. The engine made sounds he had never heard before. What is happening? He whispered. But he kept driving toward where he had left Hannah. Whatever was chasing him, he could not let it stop him from fixing his mistake. The lights behind him grew closer. Now he could see they were not attached to any vehicle. They were simply floating orbs of light, moving with purpose through the frozen air. A high-pitched sound filled the cab, making his teeth hurt. Ahead, through the swirling snow, he saw something that could not be there. A large building glowing with blue light. He was sure this stretch of highway had been empty when he drove past it earlier. His cab's engine suddenly died. The vehicle rolled to a stop half a mile from the strange building. The floating lights surrounded his cab, spinning faster and faster. Through their glow, Guy-One saw shapes moving. tall, dark shapes that seemed to shift and change as they got closer. The cab's doors locked themselves. The temperature inside began to drop rapidly. Frost formed on the windows, creating patterns that looked like writing in a language he had never seen. A voice spoke inside his head. "You have shown the true nature of humanity," it said. "Cruel, selfish, unworthy." "No," Jai-1 said. "I made a mistake. I'm going back to fix it." "Too late," the voice said. "The test is over. Earth has failed." The shapes moved closer to the cab. Through the frost-covered windows, Jai-1 could now see them clearly. They were not human, not even close. Suddenly, a bright white light shot out from the blue glowing building. It hit one of the floating orbs, which exploded in a shower of sparks. The other orbs scattered, and the dark shapes retreated. Jai-1's cab doors unlocked. A new voice spoke, this time through his radio. "Mr. Park," it said, "please proceed to the facility. Quickly. The test is not over yet, and Hannah Lee needs your help." Without hesitation, Jai-1 started his cab and drove toward the glowing building. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. He had a chance to make things right, and this time he would not fail. The facility's main door opened as Jai-1 approached. He parked his cab and hurried inside, where warm air wrapped around him like a blanket. The hallway lit up automatically, guiding him forward. He found Hannah in a large room filled with floating screens. She stood next to a man whose appearance seemed to shift and change as Jai-1 watched. The man's shadow stretched across the wall in impossible shapes. "You came back," Hannah said. Her voice was neutral, showing neither anger nor forgiveness. "I'm sorry," Jai-1 said. The words felt small compared to what he had done. "I was wrong to leave you out there. I let my past experiences cloud my judgment." "We don't have time for this discussion," said the strange man. "My name is Dae-ho Kim, and we are all in danger. The opposers have arrived earlier than expected." "The what?" Jai-1 asked. As if in answer, the building shook. On the screens, dark shapes moved through the snow toward the facility. "They believe humanity is too dangerous to join the galactic community," Dae-ho explained. "They want Earth to fail this test. The cab ride was part of our evaluation, but their interference was not planned." Another explosion rocked the building. The lights flickered, and several screens went dark. "Why should we help you?" Hannah asked. "You put us both through this test without our consent. You risked our lives." "Because this is no longer just about you two," Dae-ho said. "If the opposers succeed, Earth will be isolated. No space travel, no contact with other civilizations. Your people will be trapped in this solar system forever." The building shook again. Warning lights flashed across the remaining screens. "Facility shields at 60%, a computerized voice announced. "Outer defenses failing." "I need your help," Dae-ho said. "Both of you. The facility's defense systems require human operators in an emergency. The Galactic Council believes that advanced technology should serve species, not control them." Jai-1 looked at Hannah. "I understand if you don't trust me," he said, "but I want to make things right." Hannah was quiet for a moment. Outside, the wind howled, and strange lights flashed through the windows. "I don't trust you yet," she said finally, "but this is bigger than what happened between us." Dae-ho led them to 2 control stations. The chairs adjusted themselves to fit the humans perfectly. Screens lit up in front of them, showing the facility and the surrounding area. "The opposers are trying to breach the shield," Dae-ho explained. "We must hold them off until the council representatives arrive. Each of you controls half of our defenses. You must work together." "I see them," Jai-1 said, watching dark shapes move through his screen. "But how do we fight them? We don't know anything about alien technology." "The controls will respond to your intentions," Dae-ho said. "Don't think about the technology. Think about protecting each other, protecting Earth." The facility shook once more. Through the windows, they could see the shield flickering, sections of it turning dark. Facility shields at 40%, the computer announced. Breach imminent. Hana looked at Gaiwan. Their eyes met. In that moment, both understood that their past conflict had to wait. Earth's future depended on them working together. Ready? Hana asked. Jaiwan nodded. Ready. Above them, the shield began to crack. The shield above the facility shattered like glass. Snow and Arctic air rushed in through the gaps. The opposers descended into the building, their dark forms stretching and changing as they moved. Hana and Jaiwan worked at their control stations. The facility's defenses responded to their thoughts, sending beams of light toward the intruders. But for every dark shape they pushed back, two more appeared. The defenses are not working properly, Daho said. Your thoughts are not in harmony. You must truly trust each other for the system to work at full power. How can I trust him? Hana asked, her fingers moving across the glowing controls. He left me to die. And how can I forgive myself? Jaiwan added, his screen flashing with warning signals. What I did was unforgivable. The lead opposer floated down from the broken shield. Its form settled into something almost human, but wrong in subtle ways. When it spoke, its voice echoed from everywhere at once. You see, the opposer said, they cannot overcome their prejudices, their anger, their fear. This is why Earth must be isolated. Humans will bring their conflicts to the stars. You're wrong, Daho replied. This test is not over. The opposer raised its hand. The remaining facility shields began to crack. The test is over when we say it is over. We have seen enough. The cab driver acted out of prejudice and fear. The girl now holds onto her anger. They prove our point. Jaiwan stood up from his control station. You're right about what I did, he said. I acted out of prejudice, out of pain from my past. I let my fears control me. He turned to Hana. But that is not who I want to be. Pretty words, the opposer said. But words mean nothing. Actions are what matter. Then let me show you my actions now, Jaiwan said. He walked over to Hana's station. I put you in danger because I refused to trust you. Now I'm asking you to trust me instead. Hana looked at him for a long moment. The facility trembled around them. As more shields failed, the opposers moved closer. The defensive systems need both of you, Daho said. Working together, trusting each other. It's the only way. Hana stood up. I'm still angry about what you did, she told Gaiwan. But holding on to that anger won't help anyone. She held out her hand. Let's show them what humans can really do. Jaiwan took her hand. The moment they touched, every screen in the facility lit up with bright light. The defensive systems hummed with new power. Impossible, the opposer said, taking a step back. No, Daho said. This is exactly what we were testing for. The ability to overcome prejudice, to learn from mistakes, to choose forgiveness over revenge. This is why Earth deserves a chance. Hana and Gaiwan stood together at the central control station. Under their combined control, the facility's defenses pushed back against the darkness. Light filled every corner of the room. The opposer raised both hands now, gathering shadow around itself. Then let us see if your forgiveness can stand against our power. The real test begins now. The opposer's shadow filled the room like dark smoke. The temperature dropped rapidly as ice formed on every surface. Hana and Jaiwan stood at the control station, their hands still joined as they operated the facility's defenses together. Your species is weak, the opposer said. You let emotions cloud your judgment. You act on fear and prejudice. The galaxy will be safer with Earth isolated. The shadow pressed against the defensive shields of light that Hana and Jaiwan had created. Cracks began to appear in the glowing barrier. They are too strong, Hana said, watching their defenses weaken. We need more power. Daho stepped forward. There is one option left, he said. We can overload the facility's power core. It will push back the opposers, but he paused. Someone will need to go to the core room to activate it. In this cold, with the shields down, they might not survive. I'll go, Jaiwan said immediately. No, Hana replied. I'm younger. I have a better chance. The opposer's shadow pushed harder. More cracks appeared in the light shield. Your nobility is meaningless, it said. Even if you sacrifice yourself, Earth will still fail. Humans cannot be trusted. Jaiwan looked at Hana. I abandoned you in the cold once, he said. I won't do it again. Stay here and maintain the shields. I will go to the core. Before Hana could argue, Jaiwan ran toward the core room. The shadows tried to stop him, but Hana focused all her power through the defensive systems, creating a path for him. The core room was at the bottom of the facility. As Jaiwan ran down the stairs, ice formed on the walls around him. His breath came out in white clouds. The cold was even worse than outside. He reached the core, a pillar of blue light in the center of a round room. The controls were covered in frost. As he tried to operate them, his fingers began to go numb. Above, Hana fought to maintain the shields alone. The opposer's shadow had almost broken through. Your friend will freeze before he reaches the controls, it said. And you will watch, just as he watched you suffer in the cold. Hana knew she had a choice. She could maintain the shields and stay safe, or she could drop them and send power to warm the core room. Saving Jaiwan would mean letting the opposers in. She made her decision without hesitation. The shields dropped. The shadows rushed in, but the core room suddenly warmed up. Jaiwan felt feeling return to his fingers. He quickly entered the overload sequence. The core began to pulse with bright light. Now, Daeho shouted, join your powers. Hana ran through the shadows, ignoring the cold that clawed at her. She reached the core room just as Jaiwan finished the sequence. They grabbed each other's hands as the core erupted with pure light. The light shot upward through the facility, pushing back the shadows. The opposers screamed as their darkness was burned away. In moments, they were gone. As the light faded, Daeho walked into the core room. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood tall, glowing figures, the representatives of the Galactic Council. The test is complete, one of them said. Their voice was warm and kind. And now we know the truth about humanity. The council representatives stood in a circle around Hana and Jaiwan. Their forms were made of gentle light, and warmth radiated from their presence, pushing away the last of the bitter cold. We have seen everything, the first council member said. Their voice was clear and kind. The cab ride, the abandonment, the return, the forgiveness, the sacrifice. The opposers believed humanity would fail this test, the second council member added. They thought your prejudices and fears would prove too strong. Instead, the third council member said, you have shown us something remarkable. You have demonstrated humanity's greatest strength. Daeho stepped forward. The ability to change, he said, to recognize our mistakes and choose to be better. Jaiwan looked at Hana. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did, he said. You already have, Hana replied. When you came back, when you were willing to sacrifice yourself to save me, that's what matters. The first council member raised their hand. The facility began to repair itself. The shields were formed, the ice melted away, and the broken equipment fixed itself. Earth has passed the test, they announced. When your species develops faster than light travel, you will be welcomed into the galactic community. The opposers were both right and wrong, the second council member explained. Humans do have prejudices. You do act on fear. But you also have the capacity to overcome these flaws, to learn, to grow, to forgive. What about the opposers? Hana asked. Will they try to interfere again? The third council member shook their head. The opposers were part of the test too. We needed to see how humans would react under extreme pressure. Your choices proved your worth. "What happens now?" Jai-1 asked. "Now," Daho said, "you return to your lives. But things will be different." He handed them each a small crystal that glowed with blue light. "These will let you contact me if Earth ever needs help, and they will remind you of what happened here." "Most humans are not ready to know about us yet," the first council member said. "That time will come. Until then, you must keep this secret. But you may share the lesson you learned here tonight. That people can change," Hana said. "That it's never too late to choose a better path," Jai-1 added. Outside, the storm had passed. The stars shone bright and clear in the winter sky. Hana and Jai-1 walked to his cab together. "I can still give you that ride to Duluth," Jai-1 said. Hana smiled. "I would like that." As they drove away, the facility shimmed and vanished, becoming invisible once again. But in the cab, the two blue crystals glowed softly, reminding them that something extraordinary had happened on this coldest of nights. 1 year later, Jai-1's cab company had changed. Every car was equipped with emergency heating and shelter supplies. No passenger was ever turned away, regardless of payment problems. And on cold winter nights, he gave free rides to anyone who needed them. Hana visited often, helping to run the company's new charitable foundation. Together, they worked to make sure no one would ever be left alone in the cold again. And somewhere above, watching Earth's progress with pride, the Galactic Council knew they had made the right choice. Because sometimes the truest measure of an advanced civilization is not its technology, but its capacity for compassion, growth, and change.